And welcome to the program. I'm Doug Grindle. I'm here at Mass Audubon's Broadmoor Wildlife Sanctuary on Route 16 in Natick. And I'm here with Joy, and we're here to talk about some of the things the animals are doing in this season. It's obviously snowing out, and we're going to take a look at a couple of areas around this sanctuary and just see what the situation is going to be like. So looking forward to it, and let's go take a look.
All right.
So Joy, here we are at the Broadmoor, and behind us we have this field. Now, it's kind of covered with snow. What's going on here in this field today?
Actually, there's a lot of wildlife that you can't even see that's down below, but we can see signs of wildlife on the top as well. It looks like we had some deer coming through the field. We oftentimes have fox tracks, and if we're really lucky, we might see some little mole or vole tracks. But mostly, they're going to be underneath the field. That's where the owls are going to try to pop through the snow and actually get them through the snow.
Really? So actually owls can actually see what's going on? This is actually at night, but so they can actually see animals moving around? How is that even possible?
Well, they can see animals moving around, but they mainly use their sense of hearing. So they can actually hear most species of owl well over a football field away, and can hear them right through the snow, and they'll actually pounce right through the snow to get those animals.
Wow, so an owl might actually be able to like hear a vole moving across like the ground from here all the way like 100 yards away across the field?
They have great hearing.
Well, the traffic around here, luckily there's not that much over in the sanctuary, so, you know, I suppose that would actually make it kind of difficult for them to hear what's going on. But, well, that's amazing. I mean, but it's winter time. Now it's December. So what you're saying, though, is that animals are actually out underneath here, and it looks like there's nothing happening. So what you're saying is that there's actually a lot happening.
There is a lot happening. There are also other animals underneath the ground that we can't see right now as well. That might be animals like amphibians, like frogs and toads, and also salamanders and even snakes are all underneath, either under the water or under the ground, hibernating through the winter, and then they will emerge in the spring.
Okay, so which animals are actually moving around at this time of year?
So that would be a lot of the small mammals, small and mid and large sized mammals. We have certainly many of the smaller rodents are active underneath. And again, hopefully we'll see some of their tracks today, but then also some of the larger mammals like the coyotes and the foxes and the deer as well. We might also see quite a few birds today. There are a lot of birds out foraging for food because during the storm they were all sort of taking shelter just like we were yesterday in the storm, and now they're out hunting for food today like berries and seeds.
Now some animals, obviously, I'm going to ask some stupid questions, is like some animals hibernate, bears I'm guessing, you know, which we don't have any bears here, but which animals hibernate and which ones are hanging around, and why do some hibernate and some don't?
Well, all animals need to figure out a way to survive the winter. Some animals, like the cold-blooded animals or the ectothermic, the ones that get their temperature from the temperature around them, like that would be frogs and toads and salamanders and snakes and turtles, they have to figure out another way to deal with that, or I should say this really cold temperature. They can't get any energy, so they have to be able to just sort of sleep through that winter time and survive and not freeze in the meantime. Therefore, they do have to find a way to bury themselves where no ice will form. If you're a mammal, you may have other alternatives. You may go into a little bit of a sleep, but something like a squirrel, they're still going to be feeding during the winter. They're still going to be getting their catch of food, also a chipmunk, something along those lines. They're still going to be feeding in the winter time from their food stashes. So it's a little bit different if you're a cold-blooded or ectothermic animal, or an animal like us that gets their temperature from eating a lot of food.
Okay, well, now I can hear the chirp of birds out here, so let's just go take a look as well. You know, we see some bushes around here, there's a bush around here, but as we look at birds, I mean, like I look up in the sky, I don't really see all that many, and yet I sort of wonder, where are they? So I guess we've got some bushes over here, maybe we can go take a look over here. So where do birds live when I'm, you know, in the wintertime?
Well, if you're a small bird, of course, like most small animals, you're always concerned about bigger things. Hawks, other animals that might be out there looking for a meal, and of course if you're a small bird you don't want to be that meal, so typically they're looking for a place with shelter to be close by, and also if there is a storm they're going to seek shelter from the wind and other things in the shrubbery and in the bushes.
Okay, but I mean, when I think, I'm not that educated about like bird life, but you know, when I think about birds, I think about nests, and I'm not sure if I see a lot of nests in these bushes. They just like hanging out, you know, at the base of it. Where do they actually stay?
Well, the nests are going to be used mainly in the spring and summertime during their nesting season. There are some animals that actually do have nests in the wintertime. Those would be owls. Typically, many of our local owls actually use nests from other birds. The great horned owl is a great example, that they actually use an old hawk or great blue heron nest. If you're talking about a lot of the birds that we find around here, common backyard birds, maybe like a cardinal or our state bird, the chickadee, they actually do nest in the warmer months. So they're not spending time in their nests right now. They're actually just going to find a place for shelter.
So, because I never realized that. So basically, if there's a snowstorm out, then the birds are basically in the same boat as they would be if they were like homeless on the street in Boston. They're just like hanging out in whatever shelter they could find.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why it's great to have the forests around here, because there is a lot of natural shelter, where if you look at where they might find seeds, that might actually be in the edges of the field as well. So they're going to be actually out looking for food once the weather improves, but they still have to keep in mind, if there's a hawk overhead, they're going to want to seek shelter again.
Interesting. So, I mean, so hawks are like the biggest predator around here?
They are one of our larger predators. They're definitely not considered the biggest predator, but they are one of the larger predators that we have that are birds of prey.
Okay. In this neighborhood, but what kind of predators are there? I mean, are there like coyotes, and are those native to the area?
We have coyotes, foxes. Of the animals that are active in the wintertime, you might also see fishers. We saw some fisher tracks up the ways a little bit. And these animals are all really, really important predators to keep nature in balance. A lot of times we forget that without predators, we'd be overrun with mice and rats and all sorts of things that, of course, we don't want to be overrun with. Some of the other predators that are around here are also our owls and our birds of prey. And they're also very important rodent predators. As you may know, rodents can multiply extremely quickly, so it's very important to have those predators to keep nature in balance. And they are all animals that have been around here for thousands and thousands of years.
And well, speaking about nature being in balance, now I notice like there are some so-called invasive species, and you know, what happens, how do things like that get in here? And I notice we have like a bush over here, and maybe that's not exactly native to the area.
Yes, this is Oriental bittersweet, and I remember when I was a child growing up around here, we used to make holiday wreaths with Oriental bittersweet, and it was brought in like many invasive plants because it was beautiful. And subsequently we've realized that even though it's beautiful, if it doesn't belong here, it can eventually take over and be a real problem to remove from the environment. So we do encourage people, if you are going to plant different plants or shrubs or trees in your yard, to make sure you do plant native plants. One of the advantages of that is what the native animals eat. So if we have non-native plants, it's really hard, it's taking over the space that would have a food source and all for the wildlife that lives around here.
Okay, that makes sense. And but if you look at that, then is it really a big deal to have like these invasive plants, or is it just kind of on the margins? It's just not a nice thing to have, but it's, you know, things people can deal with.
Well, it does sometimes depend on the species, but a lot of the invasives are very aggressive and can easily take over your yard in even just a year or two. So it's one of those things that really crowds out other plants, and again is oftentimes not a food source for native wildlife. So even though you might have plants in your yard, it may still be a desert because it's a plant that won't support the native wildlife. We do also see problems with animals when people don't research their pets before they get them, and then they think it's a great idea to set them free in the wild, and that's how we end up with invasive turtles in our ponds and in our lakes. And then they compete with our native animals for habitat, for food, all those important resources, and can spread disease as well. So both non-native or invasive plants as well as invasive animals both cause problems in our environment.
Okay, well, let's go and take another closer look at what some of the animals are up to, maybe looking at some tracks in the field. Well, Joy, it looks to me like there's some tracks here. What's going on?
Well, you can tell by the tracks that it would be one of several different species. These tracks are moving the way we walk, which is 1 foot after the other like this. So this type of track is probably a deer because of where we see them crossing the field and such. But if it was a little smaller and tighter together, it might be a coyote or a fox. But by looking at the size of the track, how far the feet are apart, and the way that it walks, you can actually tell what kind of animal it belongs to.
Interesting. So are there a lot of deer around here?
We have some deer. We have a pretty regular population around here, but we wouldn't consider Broadmoor overpopulated at this point.
People say, you know, they see more and more deer in their backyards, on the roads, things like that. Do you think that there is a deer problem in this area in general, in Natick and Sherburne and these communities around here?
Well, a lot of the different communities are working on solutions right now, but here at Broadmoor, it's a little bit different. We don't have as much of an issue as some of the surrounding communities might have.
Okay, and what generally keeps the deer population in balance? Is it wolves? Is it like people? Is it cars? I have no idea.
Well, one of the great examples is in Yellowstone National Park. They actually brought wolves back. It used to be every winter that they would have to feed the deer and the elk. They'd bring in huge plane loads and truckloads of hay because all these animals were starving. But once the wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone, they found that their deer and elk population right now has never been healthier because they had predators coming in and taking care of the sick and the injured and sort of controlling the population of deer. Now some of the bushes have come back and the bears have more food. So it's sort of balanced nature again. And that's the tricky part around here. Back in the 1600s, we did have wolves around here, but they were hunted out. So now it's a little bit trickier making that, bringing that balance back. But a lot of communities are working on a variety of different solutions on that.
Okay, and we're standing here in the middle of a field, and I noticed some of these boxes are over here. And I mean, what's going on? Do you guys do research studies in this area? And what's a field in Massachusetts? I mean, if you fly over Massachusetts, you see a lot of woods. Are these natural to Massachusetts, or are these have to be maintained as a sort of a special place?
Well, back in colonial days, of course, people were farming and had cows and horses and all sorts of animals, and there were lots of fields in those times. These days, it's the easiest place for people to build homes. When a developer finds a large field, it's easy to put a lot of houses in, and then we lose the field habitat, even when we do still have quite a few forests left. So this is a very important habitat here at Broadmoor and here in Massachusetts. We've actually restored these fields, removing non-native plants and removing invasive plants. And now it is a habitat for birds such as the tree swallow. These nest boxes behind us are used by tree swallows in the spring and summertime. Now, one of the things about tree swallows is they are insect eaters, so they do need to fly south during the wintertime to places where there are still insects, and then they will come back in the springtime. But these nest boxes have actually been used for quite a number of years, and we've been doing studies for well over 20 years here at Broadmoor on not only when do those tree swallows return, is it getting earlier, and that's what we're seeing each year, but also their breeding success and things like that. So this is an ongoing project that we run here at Broadmoor each year.
Interesting. Any idea why they're coming back earlier every year?
Well, we are seeing changes in the climate. There are a lot of different changes that have been occurring. We're seeing more and more southern species up here, like the pileated woodpecker. If you've seen one, you can't miss it. They're huge. But a lot of our southern species are moving more north, and some of our species that we're used to having around here are starting to move north as well. So different animals have different conditions that they prefer, and as we see changes in habitat, we're also seeing changes in climate as well, with maybe more wet, more storms, a lot of different things occurring. It's not just that this one teeny tiny space is getting warmer. There's a lot of different changes going on all at the same time. Unfortunately, only some animals can move. That's where it's going to be tricky. Not all of our wildlife will be able to move with the changes.
That's interesting. I never heard of like animals being sort of an early warning system for potential climate change or things like that. That's it must be kind of interesting just to look at that and see the broader implications.
Well, this is one thing that Mass Audubon has been studying for many, many years, not strictly because of climate change, but Mass Audubon participates in several different bird counts and studies during the year. in conjunction also with National Audubon. So coming up this time of year, we do what's called the Christmas bird count, and we'll look in certain areas. There are different assigned territories where birders will go out and try to find as many different kinds of species as they can. In the warmer months, we actually have a nesting bird survey, and of course those would see different species as the migrants return in the spring and the summer. And then there's also a feeder bird count that normal everyday people can participate actually in February. So if I have a bird feeder at my house, I can actually count the birds that I see at my bird feeder and report them. And this is all what we call citizen science. This is where the regular person can actually contribute to information that scientists are actually using to see the changes that are occurring over time. When you have data over 20, 30, 40 more years, that's when you have really important information to give to the scientists.
Wow, sort of like crowdsourcing. Pretty interesting. Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, let's go take another look at the sanctuary in a different part and see what's going on over there.
Great.
All right, cool.
Actually,
So Joy, here are some trees. This is a forest. So what's going on here in the dead of winter, and what kind of animals are hanging out here?
well, we have a variety of different trees here in the forest. We have everything from birch to cedars to pines to oak trees. So we have both deciduous that lose their leaves in the fall, as well as some of the evergreens like the pines. So you're going to see a variety of different things. You've got food sources like the oak trees producing acorns, and then you also have trees that retain a lot of protection for some of the different animals, such as the evergreens. So there's going to be a lot of places for birds to snuggle in against the cold and the wind and the snow. And you'll also potentially have places for owls to nest. Here on the edge of the field, we also have a lot of good food sources for animals like owls with the rodents. So in the forest, this is a lot of times where you're going to find the owls actually nesting. If it's one of the smaller owls, they tend to be cavity nesters, like our little screech owls. They're looking for that little hole where they can find some shelter. If it's a larger owl, like our big great horned owl, they're very smart. They actually use a nest from another animal, such as a hawk. And hawks love to nest in the forest. So this is a great place for them. And of course, if you're an owl, you're also going to be, especially a larger one, preying on larger foods. One of the great horned owl's favorite food is actually a skunk. So if you ever smell a skunk, you never know. Look up, it may be coming from above you, and you may have just found a great horned owl nest.
Oh, that's funny. Wow. So is it basically birds that hang out in the forest, and everything else hangs out in the fields and the open spaces, or are they sort of like, you know, the smaller animals come through these as well?
A lot of animals live in the forest because there's protection there. So be it a fox or a chipmunk, there's a lot of animals that will have protection in the forest, especially the smaller animals, but even the larger animals as well. There are places to hide, there are food sources, and then there's protection from the elements. It's much harder for them to live in an open field this time of year when there's wind and the elements. So most animals at this time of year will spend a lot of time seeking protection in the forest, but may emerge to come into the fields to find food. Unless you're one of the little voles or mice, you might be underneath the snow and you'll have plenty of protection from the elements under the snow.
Makes sense. Well, I have to ask though, I mean, you know, if I were out here, I'd starve to death. What are all these animals eating, for crying out loud?
Well, some animals, as you may be familiar with squirrels and chipmunks, they're storing all that food away in the fall. It's sort of a race against time to fill their larder or fill their pantry with as much food as they can possibly find and then go back to those hidden stashes later. If you're something like a predator, like a hawk or like an owl, you are hunting during that winter season and you're hunting on a regular basis. They've got to keep that food coming in order to keep their bodies warm enough and going. Their feathers definitely help them to stay warm, but they've got to have that regular food source as well. So they're always thinking about where's their next meal.
Okay, but I mean, if I were like a vole or a squirrel
Sure.
or something and I had stored up food, I'd have the equivalent of like the vole or squirrel equivalent of like hot chocolate, and I would never leave my house. So why are they out walking around if they have food at home?
Well, sometimes they're going to a second stash as well, so you never know. Sometimes that's how we end up with oak trees, is because those little squirrels sometimes forget where their stashes are located. But there are a lot of animals that are out and about looking for food. The mice might actually be looking for food from some of the seeds of the grasses that are scattered around as well. We do also have animals around here like the birds. We saw a chickadee earlier up in the trees actually getting some seeds from some of the pines. So there are a variety of animals that will actually travel around looking for food sources as well. That would include deer, and even a little bit earlier this season, our beavers going after some of the birch trees as well.
Great, okay, well thank you very much for the explanation. Okay, let's go take another look around.
Sure.
You can really hear the birds chirping as you come through here.
Yeah,
though.
they like to hide in a lot of the bushes along the edge of the field.
Huh. Where do they actually live then?
That's where they take shelter, that's where they live.
In the bushes?
Mm-hmm. You never know what kind of tracks you're going to find around here in the wintertime. And actually, in fact, we've got some mouse tracks right here.
Oh, wow.
And you can see they're very tiny. They're 2 little feet side by side. And squirrels will have a similar kind of track with what we call double doubles.
Huh.
2 hind feet and 2 front feet.
So is that because they're hopping just along?
They have more of a hopping motion. So that's very similar also to the otters and some of the other animals that we have here at Broadmoor with the double doubles.
Wow, that's interesting. So what happens when they're coming along? Is it, I guess they're just hoping no one sees them from above, like if it's a hawk or something?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why they like the shelter of the forest. They have lots of places to hide, and as you can see, these little guys actually punched right back through the snow and went underneath the snow for a while.
Okay, wow, that looks really interesting. So I'm guessing today we've seen deer tracks, we've seen mouse tracks, have we seen otter tracks? I have no idea.
We haven't seen otter tracks, but we did see fisher tracks, which again look very similar with the double doubles.
Wow, excellent. Okay, well I guess let's go see if we can find something else.
All right.
So Joy, here we have the winter wonderland of, this looks like not a field but a pond.
This is a marsh. You can see the cattails sticking up, sort of one of the giveaways. This marsh is actually home for a huge variety of animals, even the ones that we can't see right now.
And so what sort of animals actually live around here?
Well, underneath the water, in fact, if we went through the snow and the ice, there is moving water deep underneath here. You'd find actually baby dragonflies waiting their time out till they can morph into adulthood in the spring. They're what I like to call our resident pest patrol here, eating all the mosquitoes and all in the spring and summertime. There are also turtles buried in the mud deep down, as well as frogs too. They're all looking for that deep spot that won't freeze, and they're buried in the mud, and they'll be sleeping all winter long.
Okay, now people say back in the old days, 50 years ago, they used to drain swamps, which I guess is what marshes and wetlands are called back then. Why is it important that they be here? What's so important about some water here in this sort of marshy ground?
Well, this area, because the water's not flowing as fast as, say, with a large river, it also has a lot of places for animals to hide. So it acts like a giant nursery. For example, sometimes people like to go fishing. While we don't allow fishing here at Broadmoor, a lot of the baby fish that are born here at Broadmoor actually will travel down Indian Brook, and this is the marsh created from Indian Brook, down to the Charles River. So if someone's catching a fish on the Charles River, it might actually have been born right here at Broadmoor.
Wow, and so what sort of fish are here? Is it a huge variety, or is it just like 1 or 2?
We have a variety. In fact, I don't even know how many kinds of fish we have here, but a lot of times we'll see the baby fish such as little sunfish, some of the other little baby bass, things like that. Usually when we see them here, when we do ponding and other types of programs with the kids, they're very tiny. They look more sort of minnow size. They're not the big size fish that you'd see further down on the river.
Makes sense. And so what does it take to actually maintain a place like this, or do marshes naturally maintain themselves? I mean, do they just sort of like fill up with silt and they become a field? Does it take a lot of work?
Well, certainly our area here was actually started with a man-made dam, actually 2 man-made dams on the other side of the grounds, and has been supplemented with the work of our local beavers over time. But this area has stayed flooded for certainly as long as the Nature Center and as long as Broadmoor has been here. So it's been since the 60s, if not quite a bit before. This area does change a little bit over time. You can see there are some small trees out there, but some of the animals, as they move around, do also create channels and such in deeper areas in the marsh too. So there are changes over time, but they do occur slowly.
Okay, and if you're an animal and you get kind of thirsty, now I look out and I see all this stuff is frozen over. Where do you get a place to drink?
Well, there are certain places where streams do come through. That's one of the reasons why it's so dangerous to walk on ice in the wintertime, because you never know where there's a stream actually underneath the snow. So we always caution people, you know, even though that lake or that pond may look very safe, just be very careful. And here at Broadmoor, we do make sure that people stay to the trails for their own safety. As you may be able to see, right beyond that brush there, right by the large tree, there's actually a little opening of water. And oftentimes we'll see animal tracks heading down as they find that one small bit of open water to get a drink in the wintertime.
Makes sense. Well, it sure is pretty pleasant out here. Well, look, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to show us around today. You've seen all sorts of things, the forest and bushes and fields and animals. It's just been like really interesting. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. We hope you'll come back in warmer weather as well.
All right, that'll be great. Definitely looking like a winter wonderland out here today.
It certainly is.
Yeah, it's nice.
Beautiful sight.
Sunshine on the snow. Can't ask for much more than that.